It's another episode of the Next Fix podcast where we're diving into comeback stories, shit hitting the fan, all of the things, or maybe not all of the things, but the specific things that make us think we got to do something about our lives. And it always starts when things aren't so ideal. And so we've got RL with us today. RL, I really appreciate your time. I appreciate your expertise. This is going to be a fun one because I know a
Yeah,
little bit about it. But how are you living today, my friend?
I'm doing fantastic, man. Just happy to be here. Happy to be on the show.
Yeah, it is a blessing for sure. And so, before we get into what things look like these days for you, as
For
far
sure.
as the EAT method and what you're doing to help people with toxicity, I want to know, how bad was it for you when things were rather shitty? And then what really was the genesis behind your pursuit in helping people with toxicity?
For sure, for sure. I mean, for me, like I dealt with a lot of chronic issues that a lot of people out there are dealing with today. And that stem, that when I'm talking about chronic issues, I had irritable bowel syndrome really bad. I had lactose intolerance. I had eczema was one of the biggest things because, it's one thing to have a little bit of eczema on your arm or something like that, but I had it everywhere. I'd get it on my eyelids, behind my ears, on my neck, on my knees, behind my knees, elbows, arms, and it would come up just randomly, at any time. So you deal with, the insecurities of that, of the visual aspect, and not to mention,
What I've learned, right, in my experience is that a lot of times when like our skin is an organ, right? And a
yes,
lot of times it's also an alarm system, right? So like when there's these things kind of popping up on the surface, it's a pretty good indication that there's something kind of going wrong, on the inside too, right? And so
100%.
you had eczema and then irritable bowel syndrome. I mean, what else was kind of going on for you?
Yeah, chronic headaches, and just constant headaches, and then just weight gain. You know what I'm saying? As I started to get older, I started gaining more weight. So you add all these things together and it's just like it's not going right. Look, we're all born with different dispositions. And you can call it dispositions, you can call it genetics, however you want to call it. So it's hard to dictate like when certain diseases are going to manifest because everybody's different. Everybody has a different disposition. So for
Sure.
me, it was like, it's not going right. I need to do something. The first thing I did was I got into learning more about diet and vegetarianism. That was kind of the first step. And that was really the first thing that kind of got me on the path of healing myself ultimately, because that's technically what happened. And unfortunately, when you're going through these things, like the programming kicks in because we all look at health. I shouldn't say we all, I don't like to use absolutes, but the majority of us look at healthcare in a specific light.
Right.
And that light is from a very reactive standpoint where the power is kind of taken away from you. Things happen because of circumstance versus your own doing. You know
Sure.
what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That was a big part of it for me, like an eye opening thing for me.
RL, your body is telling you some things are kind of off, right?
Right.
And you're seeing some of these issues with your body. Now, you initially started with a vegetarian approach. So you're thinking it's the intake. It's like what you're putting into your body. Was that the initial kind of suspicion?
Yeah, I mean, at that point in my life, I wanted to try anything because I had gone the allopathic route of, going to doctors and they have a certain approach. And that approach just didn't align with me. It's just something intuitively I never felt. They wanted to do, more invasive things to check out my stomach, and they wanted to give me steroid things to help with the eczema or whatnot, and it just didn't align.
Sure.
So I started looking towards the diet, right? So the first thing I did was go vegetarian about 8 years ago, and some of the things subsided. I did notice some differences, but not everything, right? And here's the thing, like when people go vegetarian, a good number of people when they go vegetarian, the first thing they want to do is just substitute the meat for plant-based meat. You know what I mean? So it's not really helping much from a health standpoint. From an ethical standpoint, completely get it. But from a health standpoint, not too much. So while it was helping a few things, with the ailments I was dealing with, it wasn't really what I was looking for. Here's the caveat, like, I was gaining weight as a vegetarian versus losing weight, and that was mind-boggling to me, because when I used to think about vegetarians, I'd be like, "Oh, yeah, you can't be, like, a fat vegetarian, it's not even possible." But it was happening, you know what I'm saying?
Known them, right? And I've seen how south it can go when you think you're being healthy just because you've eliminated meat. And again, ethically, it's can easily be confused, and the the pursuit can be misconstrued as a health pursuit, but really, if you're not familiar with the macronutrients, or if you're not really approaching it from a holistic standpoint, then you could screw it all up, man. I've seen it happen where people are like, they're just eating cheese pizza. It's like, nah, things are
Exactly.
gonna get bad for you.
Right, right. You start to you rely on a bunch of starches, and you rely on, like I said before, these plant-based meats and these substitutes that you feel is helping you with the transition, but it's really hurting you because ultimately those are processed foods. So, I kept going down that path. And really what really tipped it off for me was right around pandemic time. And that was kind of like the aha moment for me, because what happened was when pandemic's going on and everything's out there, when we're talking about like governments mandating things and all that. And for me and my family, like, it was like an eye opening thing for me, because I wanted to understand the body like 100%, because I didn't. And most of us don't. We go through school, we go through life, and we don't really understand how our body works. We only kind of see things from a pretty far view, and what we're taught, what we're conditioned to know, things like that. So I started really diving into it. And it led me to a path to understand the inner terrain, which a lot of people know as the terrain model or the terrain theory. When most of us grow up learning about the germ theory, that there's just germs attacking us at all times, and that's what makes us sick, and we spread germs and disease and blase blase. But I never learned anything about the terrain, the inner terrain, and how that dictates what happens to your body, and how the symptoms that you experience are actually your body's way of detoxing, your body's way of healing. And once I went down that path, it
Well, hold
was
on a second,
eye
RL.
opening.
I want you to unpack the terrain theory because I don't know what
Yeah.
that is, brother. I mean,
Okay. Yeah.
that's kind of new to me. So, well, yeah, what's that all about?
Okay. So the terrain model is, or terrain theory is, what is basically the way looking at health from the perspective of your inner terrain, meaning how we treat our bodies, what we do, what we consume, all right, dictates how our body forms, how healthy we are, and ultimately focusing more about the inner terrain versus what's actually coming from the outside. So the best way I can put it is like, to give you an analogy, for instance, you have a sick fish, right? And he's in a fish bowl, right? So the germ theory would tell you, okay, the fish is sick, right? We need to give the fish some medicine, right? The terrain model says, well, if the fish is sick, why don't we check the water in the bowl? Right? So it's more along the lines of, okay, why do we get sick? Why does our body manifest certain symptoms? And that's ultimately our body's response to what we are intaking. Everything from the water we're drinking, the food we're eating, the air we're breathing, our emotions, all of it matters, because ultimately our body has one job, and that is to keep you in balance and to help you survive. That's what it does. We're a self healing organism, and all the symptoms we experience are merely our body's way of either letting us know that something's wrong or healing. But from a germ theory perspective would tell you, okay, well, I'm having a runny nose or I'm having a fever. I need to stop that from happening. But the terrain theory is like, no, that's your body's way of eliminating mucus. That's your body's way of eliminating toxins. If you stop it, then what happens? Those toxins just accumulate and bigger things happen down the.
Sure. Yeah. And so it's funny you bring up like 2020 and the COVID and all of that, because we were so hyper focused on eliminating germs and, like movement kind of happened where everybody was like, we've just gotta like just destroy all these germs on our hands and things like that. And I know some people were really saying eliminating those germs and our exposure altogether may not be the solution because our body has to become stronger. Is it now? Do you agree with that, or are you saying that that would be the right approach to like fix the environment? Because I'm kind of going back to the fish thing in the water. Like, is
Right.
yeah, like how does that line up with that?
Yeah, so the basically when we're talking about COVID, for instance, yeah, the sentiment out there was, wash your hands, get rid, just stay away from germs, wear a mask, all these different things, right? From the terrain model perspective, it's got nothing to do with any of that because germs are a part of life.
Right.
If germs hurt and killed us, then we'd all be dead. That's just and for the analogy, the water basically is very similar to our environment. So like if for instance, if you live in a very industrial city, right, and you're next to factories and smoke and all those things, and then you start to develop some type of breathing issue or bronchitis or, even develops into some type of lung cancer, right? You put two and two together, right? It makes sense because ultimately you're breathing in, you are intaking toxicity, right? And if other things aren't going right and your body's not able to eliminate that, because things start and they progress. They could start with a cough, they could move to a cold, then they could move to something like bronchitis, and then it could move to pneumonia. Like these are different stages of disease
Sure.
that your body goes through, but they're all ultimately healing mechanisms that your body is going through to get it back to balance. That's what I meant by the fish in the fishbowl, right? The fish is sick. Let's check the water before we start giving it medicine.
So, at what point did you start realizing you became a vegetarian, right? At what point was toxicity? When did that light go off for
That went off right around COVID because, mainly with the mandates and everything going on, and you just didn't know what was going to happen. So I wanted to make sure that I understood, number one, everything I could about COVID and viruses and things of that nature, but also, inoculation and things of that nature. I wanted to know that before we made a decision as a family on how we wanted to go through. In that, kind of in that on that journey, I found my passion.
you?
I
Okay.
started to learn more about the body and learn more about how much has been covered up and how much is not taught to us and why the medical system is the way it is and how it's in conjunction with big pharma and the insurance companies and all these societal systems that are in place. And, it was just one of those things where it's like, wow. And I
Well,
know I have
did you get the jab? Did you end up doing the did you get the jab?
no, I did.
I didn't either. But, at the time, it was a
Yeah,
serious thing.
for
I mean,
sure.
I had very close people to me with strong arguments for, moving forward with that particular approach. Now, I don't condemn those people. Again,
Of
very
course not.
close to
Yeah,
me, and they had their opinions, and I was hearing them. I
for
didn't
sure.
agree, so I did not move forward, and looking back, I would like to think I made the right choice, just
For sure.
because of what I have, at this point, I feel what would I truly know? Probably not much, but from what I can gather is that there's a myriad of negative effects from, just getting, that done to our bodies, right? Like, and it's
For
all in
sure.
good faith a lot of times by people to, create that resistance to something that was at the time understood to be killing everybody. And so I don't condemn anybody for doing it. And I really thought it through. Like, am I making the herd worse? Like, am I
Yeah,
doing
yeah.
it wrong? And I questioned myself many times,
For sure.
but you feel like this was the time when you discovered your passion.
Yes.
And so, looking back, like, how do you feel about that? Like, during that time and you and the decision that you had made?
I mean, I'm forever grateful that I went down that journey because I learned so much about it and I was able to educate other people and help people see health in what I consider the natural way because like all of our answers to everything from a health perspective is in nature. It's right there. Unfortunately, we've just been pulled away from nature so far that we're just not exposed to it. So that's kind of my path is from a teaching perspective and a coaching perspective. Yeah, looking back at it, and I know we made the correct decision.
So
I know we
what are your, maybe I kind of jumped in here a little bit earlier, but I
have.
do want to know, like you had mentioned before we hit record, you mentioned that you cut out alcohol, right? And so, that's something we talk about a lot here. What are your thoughts on on that? Even though I believe them to be obvious, but I
Yeah.
want to know your perspective.
It's actually, I'm actually glad you brought it up because I think we characterize, different foods and drinks and substances, and divide them, right? And separate them. But ultimately, it comes down to two things. And a lot of things in life come down to two things. I call it the duality of life, right? It comes down to what is appropriate for my body and what is not, what is healthy for my body or what is toxic. And there really is no gray area based on my philosophy and what I've learned. So when you look at alcohol, while there are levels of toxicity, it's toxic, obviously, but so is eating cooked food technically. Different levels of toxicity, right? But they're both toxic for your body. And they both will cause, some form of situation, right? That your body's going to have to get itself out of, right? Alcohol a lot quicker, but, depending on what you're eating, of course. Yeah. So for me, once I started learning this and, I wasn't a heavy drinker, but I drank socially, I was, and we did a lot of social things. So we were drinking, and my wife, and I'll bring her into this too. Like she was at a point where she was drinking maybe half a bottle of wine to a bottle of wine a day. You know what I mean? So that
Yeah.
was getting kind of heavy. So as we learn more about the body, we realize, it's time to let go of the alcohol as well because just the toxicity and it just ultimately is poison. And anything that is toxic is ultimately poison. Different levels of poison, but still poison.
Sure. Sure. And I can appreciate you mentioning like it's either helping or it's not, right?
Right. It's that
However,
simple.
there's something to be said for, degree or the amount or the volume, if you will, right? Like, because an apple a day keeps the doctor away, right? And so that
Right.
you've got this fruit and in its pure form, fantastic. There's nutrients and there's good sugars and these things like that. But if that's all you ate, and let's call it you ate 15 of them a day, you may run into some issues. And so, like, I could see how like either something is really, it's moving you in the right direction or it's not. However, I mean, how do you feel about too much of a good thing being an issue as well?
I think at the end of the day, balance is a good word. You brought up the apples, so I'll address the apples. I live a fruit based lifestyle. What that means is the majority of food that I eat is fruit, raw fruit. Okay. So if you ate apples every single day of your life and only apples, and you were getting enough calories from those apples. So, depending on how much you work out, depending on all those types of things, let's just use an average of 2,000 calories, right? Average apple's about 75 calories, right? So let's say you ate 25 apples, right? That would get you around there. And my math might be off, so I apologize.
Close enough,
um,
but
right. You'd be okay. You'd be okay on that. Eventually, there's the thing about the fruit kingdom, and when I say fruits, I'm talking fruits, veggie fruits, anything with seeds in it, right? Eating a variety is always going to give you a variety of nutrients. So a variety of fruits is definitely something that I would recommend, including leafy greens, right? Because I think leafy greens give you tons of minerals as well. But eating 25 apples versus eating a cooked food diet, 25 apples all
now
day.
you've mentioned the cooked food thing a couple times, right? So
Yes.
what is maybe what are some of the pitfalls there? Because I'm not privy to that.
Yeah. And look, just from a humanistic standpoint, just from the human species, like for generations, thousands of years, we've been eating mostly cooked food, right? But from a species appropriate diet, the way our body was designed, it's not designed to eat cooked food. So when we're cooking our food, number one, it devalues the nutrition you're getting automatically. Like nutrient degradation starts at 120 degrees. Now think about how hot you cook your food. Right? We're cooking it 300, 400 for grilling it, sometimes 500, 600 degrees, right? So you're already degrading the nutritional value there. Okay. Also, what does cooking your food do? It gets rid of the water in the food. So now you're eating a dehydrating diet. One of the biggest problems of the human species right now is we are chronically dehydrated. I like to use this analogy, sorry if it's a little much for people, TMI, but look, we eat and then we what? We poop, right? So, if we're eating food that doesn't give us water content or a high water content, that food goes through the digestive process, then ultimately it has to be eliminated what the body doesn't use. Well, where's your body getting that water from? It's going to have to pull it from other places because you're not getting the water from your food. So that's a big aspect of that. And then think about everything that you cook your food with. You're adding oil to the food, you're adding seasonings to the food, you're combining different foods together. All these different elements are all foreign to the body. Your body looks at it as foreign chemistry and what your body has to do to digest it and then to assimilate all the nutrients out and then get rid of it. All those extra processes cause extra burden on the body. More burden taken away from the body means that it's going to have less energy to heal itself, to revitalize tissue, regenerate cells, and things of that.
think truly agree because I honestly, if I have a cooked meal like in midday,
Mhm.
I'm screwed. Like I take a nap. And
Right.
I've always just kind of because nobody watching the show doesn't know that obviously I filled my body with tons of drugs and poison for a long time. So I kind of, and I'm diabetic. So I kind of just believe that I've done some damage to my, digestive system,
For sure.
which is most likely true to some degree.
For sure.
But when I eat a cooked meal, right, and on the degree to which it is cooked or prepared, so in your words, this is where I'm agreeing with you, is that the degree to that meal being prepared, meaning oil, seasoning, and so forth, the more that that is involved, the harder it is for me to really digest, and the shittier I feel almost every time. And so during the day, what I typically do to stay light on my feet is like maybe some oatmeal, right? Some yogurt, I do things like that, not cooked meals because it just ruins me, right? Like I mean, I'm screwed. Like I can't even focus like as a result of it, right? And so I feel like I agree with you there that like the more times I eat a cooked meal, in fact, I even know when I see it coming,
Yeah.
I'm like, "Man, I'm done for 2 hours. Like, I can't think. I'll have to sit down and just call." I was like, I'll just have to, like, sit and relax, which a lot of people, especially in the States, man, they're okay with that. They're alright with that. Like, that's what you do. You eat, and then you just, you stop
Food
everything,
coma.
and you relax, but I'm not cool like that. I don't prefer that. And so there's a ton of credibility to what you're saying, at least in my mind, right? Like I agree with you, man. And so where did they end up leaving you, right? So you found your passion. What would
Right.
you say that passion is? This today, what is your passion, right? What exactly is it for you that you pursue each and every day? Because I know it's serious, man. I love the way you talk about all this.
Appreciate it, man. It's to share this light to as many people as I can. It's to share this information. And the great thing about it is everything I talk about, I do. Right. So it's applied. And I know because with all the people that I've worked with and the people that have, watched my videos and things of that nature, or I've taught and whatnot, when they apply it, they see it happen. And just that effect that it can have.
See what
See, watch their body transform ultimately. Watch how their awareness, their body intelligence becomes just so much more vivid to them. It's just an amazing thing because the body is we are amazing creatures. And so much power has been taken away from us, and being able to share that light with people and see them have that realization is priceless. It's just that's what I do it for, and I love it.
You know, I say often that the body is such a ridiculously amazing machine, and
Oh, yeah.
we taint it, and we don't maximize it. You know, we usually run at a very low percentage of what we're capable of. And there's parts of my journey that have blown my mind. I mean, there was such a long time of my life where all I consumed was alcohol. And somehow, some way, I was able to move forward. I was somehow able to metabolize it and not die, which is just, it's kind of bonkers, man. It's kind of bonkers. And so it's the gift and the curse because it
Yeah.
can fool us, am I right? Into thinking
Oh,
that
yeah.
we're not as bad as maybe we are.
Great point. Great point. And I'll even take it further because like you made a great point about it fooling us. It's the same thing with ailments like Crohn's disease or irritable bowel syndrome or lactose intolerance. All these different things that we accept as failures of the body. There's something wrong with the body, but it's not. What it's telling you is your body is speaking to you and letting you know the things that you are ingesting are not meant for the body. I'm just telling you quicker than the next person. And why does that happen? Because over generations and generations and generations of poor eating habits, we have built up tolerance to these things, just like the alcohol. So as you drink alcohol and you drink it a lot, guess what? You build up tolerance. And then all of a sudden, you know what? Oh, I'm all right. I can handle this. I can do this. I can function. I feel good. And, not understanding what is actually happening. Your body is going to put things in place that's going to help you survive, right? And that's what happens. It builds up that tolerance, but all that toxicity accumulates and accumulates. And then all of a sudden, it's like a piano drops on your head because now you're dealing with some severe health issues that you didn't even see coming because you had built up a tolerance for so long. It's the same thing with those other things I mentioned.
Yeah.
So when you get a diagnosis like that, what I recommend for people to do is to understand, okay, well, what am I eating? What am I doing to disrupt my body? And then start eating what you're supposed to eat and watch how it doesn't happen anymore. And that's an amazing and an enlightening experience.
And I had mentioned to you that I was in the holistic health space in
Yes.
sales. What I who I represented had helped a young girl, and she was kind of the poster child. She had Hashimoto's, an autoimmune disease, and by paying attention, because at the end of the day, the person I was representing, the real solution was to pay attention to the toxicity, the inflammation in our bodies through what you're putting into it, right? And so the Hashimoto's vanished once it came at it from an approach very much like the one you're describing. When that specific approach was taken, all of a sudden, no more Hashimoto's.
Hmm.
And so
Amazing.
yeah, and so that I think, man, it's an unpopular approach. I feel it's catching some steam though, because it's you go to a doctor, they don't want to take that approach. It's not good for business. It's not, and
No.
why would it be? Why would it
Yeah.
be? If they have a professional practice, why would they put themselves out of business? I get it, I guess, but like if you were to really want to help people, then maybe you would want to explore some of these
100%. 100%. I mean, look, the medical system is in place for a reason, and it's not necessarily always the doctor's fault. They are masters and geniuses of their education, right? So if they're taught within a system, they are going to be fantastic at that system. Like, I've done a lot of different studies on different presentations I've done on how medical school works. And it wasn't until 1985, I believe, that nutrition was even recommended to be in medical school. And I'm not saying that it was mandated, it was recommended.
yeah.
11 and only 11% of the medical schools actually utilize any type of nutritional education. So that's what we're dealing with when we're talking about the medical system when you go to the doctor. Doctors take a reactive approach. You have a
Right.
symptom, they're going to react to the symptom. when we're talking about detoxing and what I do, specialization and naturopathy and things of that nature, that is a proactive approach. We are going to find out, okay, what is the ultimate root cause of what's going on? And we're going to fix those situations so this doesn't manifest anymore. So it doesn't happen anymore versus
Tell me about the EAT method, man. I want to know more about.
okay, so throughout this journey, I started studying a lot of different naturopaths, natural hygienists, coaches, things of that nature that are kind of in that natural lane per se. And I'm getting information from all of them, right? And then I'm also utilizing my own intuition. And I came up with my own philosophy and I started to apply it and it worked. And I'm glad you brought up the girl with the Hashimoto's because this ties right into it to explain how this philosophy works. So it's EAT, EAT is the acronym. The E stands for energy efficiency, right? So remember how I talked about looking at things in a simple way? There's the duality of it, there's one or the other, right? So when we eat food, we're getting energy, right? Not just caloric energy, we're getting electromagnetic energy, right? That is what our body, like we're electrical beings. We are if somebody has a heart attack, they're going to shock them, right? We are electrical beings. So when we eat food, we need foods with high electricity, right? But we also need foods that don't cause a lot of burden when we're digesting the food. You talked about when you eat cooked food, you want to go to sleep, right? There's a reason
Yeah,
for that. When we eat foods, it's energy efficiency is basically our body's profit and loss system. We want to eat high energy foods that cause the least amount of burden. Therefore, our body has a huge net energy, right? Unfortunately, our society and culturally and traditionally, we eat a lot of foods with low energy, if not any energy, that cause high amounts of burden during the digestive process. So we don't have the net energy. So our body cannot heal itself. It doesn't have the excess energy to actually revitalize yourself, regenerate cells and things of that nature. So that's the first part, the energy efficiency. For the Hashimoto's, when you talked about her changing her diet, what happens is now her body had excess energy to actually heal itself, heal the uh,
right.
the thyroid, right? And
Exactly.
that's unfortunately what we don't understand. That's why it's the first letter in the EAT philosophy, but the most important. Fruits are the most electrical food and energy efficient food on the planet, bar none. It's been measured by angstroms, somewhere around 12 to 13,000 angstroms per piece of raw fruit, and they have the least amount of burden during digestion. They're the easiest to digest. You can digest fruit anywhere from 30 minutes to roughly 2 hours, right? Very quick, right? So a lot of excess energy for the body. We'll reverse that to meat. Meat, when you cook it, it gives you zero magnetic energy, zero, and causes a high amount of burden, sometimes up to 8, could even be 24 hours to fully digest. That's
Sure.
a big energy drain on the body. So that's the energy efficiency aspect. The more energy we have, the more our body can rebuild tissue, can heal certain things that are going on within us. The A is avoid acid forming foods. Back to duality. There's only two sides of chemistry. There's acidic acid side and the base alkaline side. Our body needs to be alkaline dominant. Our blood is alkaline dominant, 7.4 on a pH scale. If our blood ever becomes toxic outside of that 7.4, we've got like a few minutes to live. So our body is doing everything in its power to make sure none of this toxicity gets in the blood, right? To keep you alive.
Okay.
So we need to eat alkaline dominant foods in order to be the best versions of ourselves. Unfortunately, we eat mostly acid forming foods, and those acids cause tremendous burden. They accumulate, and acids, if anybody remembers chemistry class, they're destructive, they're corrosive, they burn through stuff, they just break you down. Whereas alkalinity is revitalizing, regenerating. It's the living aspect of life, not the dying aspect of life. So avoid acid forming foods. That's the A. And then the T is toxicity as well, avoiding toxicity. So that means things like smoking. alcohol, even electricity to a certain amount, Wi-Fi, 5G, all those different things. A lot of the stuff we can't, control, but do the best you can. What type of cleaning products are you using? What type of soaps are you using? All of that matters.
Right. What about, do you, like in the T, toxicity, do you address mold? Or do you talk about mold? I mean, I'm just kind of going back to my days in toxicity, right? And so it's always like mold, being exposed to like lead paints, a lot of this crazy stuff, or like pesticides. Again, to your point, it's hard to really avoid some of these
For
things. Like,
sure.
gee, that I have heard the argument against all of those frequencies hitting us in a negative fashion and
Mhm.
what it can do to create disruption in our brain's ability to do what it's supposed to do and our body's ability to do what it's supposed to do. I do appreciate the simplicity. I'll take 3 letters in an acronym. You know, I'm like, this is easy for me to remember. It's EAT. I got it, right? Like
Yes,
I think that's where we can actually achieve, is when we approach things with a simplistic
for sure.
approach. Every time it pays to be that way. So now, okay, so what are you doing? You mentioned that you coach people and you help people.
Yeah.
You have a book, right?
Yeah, I
Is
got a
what?
book coming out January 28th called Detox Yourself, The Secret to Freeing Your Mind and Creating a Healthy Life. The premise on that book is a lot of what I've been talking about here, but it's about understanding how you've been intoxicated in the first place. Because before you can detox yourself, you have to understand what's going on. And I'm not just talking about the food, I'm talking about societal conditioning. Like why do we look at health the way we do? Why do we look at food the way we do? Why do we look at banking the way we do? Just all kinds of different things that are built that are kind of built into the infrastructure of society. The first part of it is about understanding how we've been conditioned, and the second part of it is, okay, now that I acknowledge how I've been intoxicated, what do I do to detox myself? So that's what the second half of the book is about. So that, yes, that comes out January 28th. That'll be available on Amazon. You can pre-order it now on Amazon or my website, theeatcoach.com.
Yeah, I'm gonna get all that in print for everybody. And
Beautiful.
what do you bring up too? I was just talking about this about my grandma. And we were kinda laughing about it, and she's passed. She had, like, the canned food was, like, nuts. I was throwing away all this canned food, and we were making jokes about it, but she was a product of that particular time. Like, I don't
Yes.
wrong her, and she wasn't crazy.
Right.
She was living on a farm where there was no electricity and canned food wasn't a thing, and they were, looking back, we're connecting the dots quite easily, right? Well, there's
Yeah.
probably a better way to be eating. However, when you're doing things that way and somebody's like, "Guess what? You can have this food and it can stay in the closet for 2 months and you can still eat it and not die." Everybody's like, "What?"
Right. Yeah.
So she just looked at like this volume of food as wealth, for her and where she came from. That was really her, I don't know for certain, but I imagine like that's why there was all these canned food, like so
For
much
sure.
canned food, because she came from a time that it was like, man, this is the best science out there. And so I'm rooting for you, because this is the next. We are in a current generation where we're also shifting again, and people like yourself are helping that shift, because we're getting away from the way doctors treat us, you know, how they go about things. We're kind of re-evaluating our system. I
For
believe
sure.
so. I believe it's growing, right?
Yeah.
The attention in this area is growing, and the way that we're eating is also changing. And as people like yourself, and like I said, I know, I would say I know like a little bit more than the average person,
For sure.
maybe,
For
but
sure.
like it's very important, because I think that this is going to be the next evolution in the way that we look at food. Because cuisine and dining and like I would like to appreciate chefs and meals prepared that way. And some of my best friends are chefs.
Yeah. My
Chefs.
best friend's a chef.
Well, when they make food, you know
Yeah.
what you're gonna get. So you're probably
Yeah.
doing that math nowadays. Like, I don't know.
Oh yeah, yeah. Always. 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 Yeah, yeah. But it's about balance. At the end of the day, like, I when I work with people, I talk about, I'm gonna meet you where you're at, right? Like not everybody's in the same position. I've worked with people that, eat 100% cooked, and I'm just trying to get them to 90%. You know what I mean? And then we take incrementally. We got to understand where we're at, and know that it's not a quick fix. It's not something that you do overnight. While some people try to go cold turkey, I always let them know, hey, take your time and give yourself grace, because there's a lot of years of conditioning and looking at food as entertainment versus nourishment. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's just real good wisdom anyway. We talk about substance abuse a lot. And, just thinking you're just gonna white knuckle it, man. There's not a single person that's successful in recovery that says, "Oh, that's the way to do it," right? Like
Right.
it's just not wise. So even a
Right.
person, they're downing 2 liters of soda, or maybe four, 2 liters, 4 liters.
Right.
And it's like, you don't want to shock them so badly that you just yank away what they've been doing for the last 10 years. It's just this, it's a recipe for failure. So I really appreciate that. And I think that the reason why you've been successful working with people is that particular approach. Because it's just, you're not setting them up for success if you're just like, well, guess what? Go in your pantry, throw it all away.
Right, right,
So it's just not going to happen. People are going to
no.
freak out.
There's a statistic that's something like, and I might get the numbers a little bit off, so don't quote me on this, but I'm gonna paraphrase it. Uh, when you make one change, when you focus on making one change, people are like 85% successful. When you try to do 2 changes, it drops to like 25%.
Okay. But
So,
whether
incremental
you spot
steps.
on the numbers or not, but that makes sense to me because it's the truth. And that's why the best change makers, the best leaders, the best coaches, it's like just little tiny bites, baby steps, however you want to word it. But it's like, that's the way you get it done, man. It is truly the way that you find success. And people think that it needs to be a massive jump, but
Right.
it's so much more advantageous to just take it one step at a time and then just keep making that small adjustment.
Oh, yeah,
And then before you know it, it's like you're an entirely different person.
for sure.
So that's amazing, brother. So I want to truly appreciate your journey and your
Thank you.
mission as your passion. Well, now we're talking about like 6 years, man, right? Almost, 6 years.
Well, I mean, since I've been vegetarian, it's been 8, but as far as like where I'm at on my diet now, about 3 years to where, because I'm like I talked about a fruit-based lifestyle. I eat about 85, 90% raw, whole foods, what most would call the frugivore fruitarian diet, where it's fruits, leafy greens, some nuts, some seeds, and then the other 10, 15% I do eat cooked plant-based.
Okay.
So,
Yeah,
but yeah, it took a while to get there.
buddy of mine show up in Las Vegas when I was living there with like a bag full of nuts and uncooked food. And I was like, you're an idiot, man. What are you doing?
Right, 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 right. Yeah.
Well, listen, hey, listen, brother, I truly appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, for
And I'm
sure.
gonna put everything in writing so everybody can come find and get some eyeballs on your stuff, man, because this is life-changing stuff, man.
Thank you.
For
Appreciate it.
people that can make these moves in their life and especially to get some mentorship, some help with it, that's where it's at, man. Always getting better. But yeah, this has been another episode of The Next Fix. We'll see you on the next one, guys.